with any form of communication, the first thing you have to do is listen. You have to find out and do research on your target. And when you're trying to communicate with journalists, your target is that journalist and ultimately their audience. So find out who they are, do some examination, do some serious active listening. There are some tools right at the end, and I'll do a top 10 list of tools that you can use at the end to help you with active listening, help you with being an expert and going forward. But really do some examination of your audience and use your ears. It's important for you to find out what really motivates these people. Journalists are doing this all the time. Journalists know how to listen. That's their main skill set, because they have to find out what the story is so they can accurately report it to their audience. And some of this is basic for a lot of you who have gone through J school and decided to go to the dark side, but that's fine. Essentially, the real journalists who are out there, and you know this, are not the talking heads you see on TV. They're people in the field interviewing and listening and creating stories. And you know what motivates journalists? And I didn't get this right off the bat, because when I left college, I was working for New England Sports Network for a little while. And I cover sports, I cover town meeting stuff, I cover technology, go to CES every year. I cover food and different events. But I didn't really realize, I went to, like I said, Northeastern, and they have a co-op program. I didn't have any co-ops in journalism. I was a business major for 2.5 years. So my co-op experience was in finance and at a bank. So I didn't really understand, wow, a journalist has to do all these things. They have to really do their research to find out what's going on. And they are motivated by different things. So the motivation comes back to, they want to make money, they have to eat. But they love exposure, they love getting a great story, and they love the recognition that comes with it. I do too. I mean, anytime I write something that goes national, and I've worked for NPR, the Boston Globe, New York Post, a number of online publications, Technology Review, Gatehouse Media, anytime I have a byline or a story, like the audio clips, me talking, you wouldn't ever want me talking except maybe today. I did 2 radio clips for NPR, which is for BUR, which is the NPR station in Boston. Just so cool to have your story out there with a major organization, major news outlet. So they're motivated by that exposure and that recognition. But the only way they can get that is if you give them topics that enthrall, topics that are interesting. The campfire shot is really indicative of that. You have to captivate your audience if you can. And one quick word on social media tools is, don't use the tools if you don't want it. You don't have to use any of these things. And in a second, in addition to the top 10 list, before that I'll go into my 10-minute rule that I tell every journalist class that I teach a session to. But you don't have to use any of this stuff. You can get in touch just writing stuff on the back of a pizza box or sending faxes. They still work. We were talking earlier about how many releases you did last year. 2. Yeah. Releases in the old form still get attention. They get attention at weekly newspapers where they don't have other stories or don't have the staff to chase this stuff down. They're going to run your release as is because they don't have it. It does help them out if you send it to them electronically, so they don't have to retype the whole thing in or have someone else do that, because that wastes another hour of their time. But releases as they used to be aren't the method for getting stories out there, or getting recognition for your client, or getting your, just being successful, or getting the journalist some success. But you can get in touch any way you can, any way you want, if you have a good story to tell. Fax machine still works, Mimeo still works. There's the box of pizza. I saw Jason had a pizza in his keynote this morning, so I was like, all right, I gotta have a pizza in my slides anyway. Help us get great stories and help us do our jobs. So let's stop here for a second. Do you have any questions yet on any of this stuff, or where I'm headed with this? I'm gonna, go
On
ahead.
the release side, you say, so not so much valuable to journalists anymore, but how about from a customer perspective? Because I know the industry that I work in now is still pretty heavy, you know.
Well, they are, and I mean, you talk PR Newswire, you talk about a number of different professional outlets that, let's wave them around to the side, number of outlets that publish these releases for people to see. That still exists,
Okay.
but that almost goes to the self-publishing model that we talk about. And we'll talk about blogging a little bit and creating buzz in different ways. But releases as a method to get an editor's attention, to then assign a reporter, to then chase down a story, it's not happening nearly as much at the bigger outlets. It's certainly happened, like I said, at the weeklies, the small places that they don't have the staff to chase everything down. They'll do some preliminary research, call in, verify the quotes that you put in there, and run the thing. So if you don't have more questions, let's go into the whole J-School thing. When you go get your journalism degree, you're taught the 6 elements. It's always the 5 W's and the how. And essentially, you can create a story using only 2 of these. I put some examples together saying there was a storm in Kennesaw yesterday. That's just the what and the where. And that could run as a news story. No problem. If you injected your client into that, then you have a who. If you injected how the storm came up, or maybe your client is a siding company that survived during the storm. Not really a full story that a journalist is going to go after, but you're hitting on all these tools. The why is always a wild card. Journalists can't always find out why something happened, but they at least want to get the news out there. Let's go back into the how. The way you can get us to cover stuff is by serving stuff up that's appetizing. Don't give us crap. Give us a story that is really enticing, that keeps us engaged no matter where we're reading. And what you'll find is that the audience will determine what journalists write about. So if you can step past the journalist, again, it goes back to that research, step past the journalist, find out who they report for, do your research and find out what they've written in the past. We'll go into Google Alerts and using them a lot more effectively than a lot of people use them now. And even in sessions I gave this spring, I was talking to, granted it was a group of journalists, but I was speaking to a group in Philly, and I mentioned Google Alerts, and about half the room was using them. And I said, why wouldn't you just set this loose? It's free and you don't have to do any work. Everything's delivered to you. But the active listening part is choosing what topics and who to follow, and we'll cover that in a second.